A small body of news became a thunderclap. The parent of 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro have been arrested and charged with murder, while officials say they now have a pretty good indication where the infant's remains may be found. Hit subscribe and ring the bell for first-hand updates on this case and other investigations as new facts are confirmed. Jake and Rebecca Haro appeared in court this week after being arrested at their home on suspicion of murder and for making a false police report. Both are being held on $1 million bail, and both were appointed public defenders for their first appearances. The charges mark a dramatic escalation from a missing person investigation to a full criminal prosecution alleging long-term child abuse that ended in the death of an infant. In a press conference, the Riverside County District Attorney said the filing reflects prosecutors' belief that Emmanuel was the victim of ongoing abuse and that those injuries ultimately killed him. The shift from a missing person alert to murder charges follows weeks of investigative work. Numerous interviews, search warrants, digital and electronic forensics, and the piecing together of a timeline that investigators say does not align with a stranger abduction. Prosecutors have publicly stated a possible window of death ranging up to 9 days before the day Rebecca Haro reported the child missing, a claim that raises very difficult questions about timelines, oversight, and how early warning signs were handled. Arrests on murder charges are grave measures typically reserved for cases where investigators believe there is sufficient probable cause to support a homicide prosecution. The filing in this case signals that prosecutors and investigators believe they have evidence worth advancing to court. The legal posture now facing the Haros is serious. Bail of $1 million each suggests prosecutors consider them both flight risks or a danger to public safety, and the arraignment set for early September will be a key procedural moment where the court will hear the charges formally and where defense counsel may begin to test the evidence. At this early stage, the accused are entitled to presumption of innocence and a rigorous defense. Yet the criminal filing also means investigators will be working to build a case that can survive the standards of proof required at trial. That involves turning forensic traces, witness statements, and digital logs into a coherent narrative that proves beyond a reasonable doubt what prosecutors allege. Because murder charges have been filed, procedural safeguards will increasingly drive public disclosure. Investigators and the DA will likely be cautious about releasing key pieces of their proof, both to preserve the integrity of the case and to avoid compromising the prosecution. That means the community will have to balance a natural demand for immediate answers with the recognition that prosecutors must follow rules of evidence and due process. For families and neighbors, the emotional responses, shock, grief, and fury are immediate and raw. For the criminal justice system, the work is methodical and precise. Assemble evidence, demonstrate cause and culpability, and give the defense every opportunity to respond. As the case proceeds through the courts, expect intense examination of the initial reporting and response. When was a child last seen alive? What did medical and welfare agencies know? Who had access? The answers will emerge slowly through court filings, motions, and, ultimately, trial testimony unless a plea resolves the matter sooner. For now, the arrests and charges mark a grim turning point. This began as a missing child story and has transformed into a homicide investigation that will subject the family, the community, and the local child welfare system to intense scrutiny. Investigators now say they have a pretty good indication where Emmanuel's remains might be located, and they have concentrated search operations in the area. Nearly 2 weeks after Emmanuel was reported missing, law enforcement described an active search in a remote field off the State Route 60 freeway in Moreno Valley, where officers, K-9 teams, and forensic crews swept the ground. The participation of cadaver dogs, aerial support, and methodical ground searches speaks to the seriousness with which detectives are treating this lead. In one particularly public moment, investigators said the father accompanied them during a search in that field while in custody, an unusual and dramatic development that only underscored how investigators were closing in on sites they believed could yield physical evidence. When officials say they have indication about location, that language usually reflects a convergence of investigative steps. Witness statements, digital records such as GPS or cell pings, forensic traces, and sometimes admissions or tips. A working hypothesis about a likely site will prompt a focused search designed both to locate remains and preserve evidence that might reveal how death occurred and whether the injury was accidental or inflicted. Forensics teams that recover human remains will pursue DNA confirmation and will search for surrounding physical evidence. Clothing, bedding, tools, or other material that could tie a location to the family or to a sequence of events. If remains are found, forensic pathology will try to determine cause and time of death, but those conclusions can take days or weeks of technical analysis. The Sheriff's Department has been careful to say that while the investigative picture has shifted away from a stranger abduction, recovery is not assured and the search remains ongoing. That caution is necessary. Remote terrain, decomposition, and environmental factors complicate recovery. If the remains are located, investigators will still need to link them to Emmanuel legally and scientifically, then tie that death to culpable actions by an individual or individuals in order for criminal charges to stick. That evidentiary chain, from finding remains to proving homicide in court, is a long, technical road. It requires coordination between patrol investigators, homicide detectives, forensic teams, the coroner's office, and prosecutors. Authorities have been explicit. The evidence gathered so far has led them to conclude a kidnapping in Yucaipa did not occur. That important shift in the case's framing, from an apparent abduction in public to an allegation of fatal child abuse in the family environment, changed the investigative priorities. Instead of focusing primarily on canvassing the public for a stranger's vehicle or a hurried abductor, detectives widened the net to include a forensic sweep of private spaces, digital device extraction, and scrutinizing the household's history. That redirection reflects a hard reality investigators confront in many missing child cases. Statistically, children are most often harmed by someone they know, and when investigative clues do not show a clear external trail, the search for physical evidence must broaden inward. The district attorney and the sheriff have been blunt about what they believe. Prosecutors allege Emmanuel was subjected to child abuse over time that ultimately proved fatal. Those are serious accusations that will require medical and forensic corroboration, records, autopsy findings, and other evidence that establish both the presence and timing of inflicted harm. In announcing the filing, prosecutors pointed to interviews, search warrants executed, and digital evidence analyzed. The claim that the infant may have died up to 9 days before being reported missing raises particularly difficult questions for investigators, for social service agencies, and for the community at large about how risk signs are detected and acted upon. A central and troubling element in the public statement from officials has been the prior history associated with the father, Jake Haro. Authorities describe him as an experienced child abuser, with a prior child abuse prosecution that ended in probation rather than prison time. The district attorney called that earlier outcome an outrageous error in judgment and suggested that if the father had been incarcerated then, Emmanuel might still be alive. That is a strong claim and one that intentionally draws attention to system-level failures, prosecutorial discretion, sentencing decisions, and the adequacy of protective services in preventing repeat harm. When courts hand down probation in child abuse cases, those decisions are sometimes controversial. Prosecutors and advocates argue that incarceration can protect children and deter future abuse. Defense attorneys and some judges point to rehabilitation and proportionality concerns. The Haro case now puts that balance under a harsh public spotlight. Officials have said this was preventable in numerous ways, which is as much critique of prior legal decisions as it is an indictment of the acts prosecutors now allege. The implication is that systems designed to protect children, courts, probation officers, child protective services, may have missed opportunities to intervene decisively in a household that later produced fatal consequences. Beyond the allegations against the parents and the possible recovery remains, this case has produced a cascade of investigative steps that signal how law enforcement builds evidence in high-stakes child deaths. Riverside County detectives served multiple search warrants, seized a vehicle owned by Jake Haro for forensic processing, and collected digital and electronic materials for close analysis. Child Protective Services confirmed prior involvement with the family, but stated they never removed Emmanuel from his parents' custody, an important distinction that, to many in the community, raises urgent questions about how and when protective interventions are warranted and executed. Rebecca Haro, who initially reported her son missing and whose public pleas for help were widely broadcast, reportedly ceased cooperating with investigators after authorities confronted her with inconsistencies in her statements. That withdrawal of cooperation complicates the investigation. It reduces the flow of first-hand information, forces detectives to rely more heavily on indirect evidence, and fuels both speculation and legal defense strategies. Meanwhile, Riverside County Children's Services removed another child from a Haro household for safety reasons, underscoring the broader welfare concerns investigators and social service agencies had about the home environment. The forensic work and the ongoing searches are not yet fully disclosed to the public. Lab results and technical analyses take time, and prosecutors and detectives often hold back detailed findings while they preserve investigative integrity and prepare potential trial exhibits. However, that lack of immediate transparency has stoked public anger and conspiracy theories online. Officials have urged the public to avoid spreading unverified rumors and provide credible tips directly to law enforcement. The Sheriff's Homicide Detail provided a dedicated tip line and encouraged anonymous reporting through established hotlines. Every credible piece of evidence, a dash cam clip, a store camera, a neighbor's recollection, can be crucial. For the community, the case is wrenching on multiple levels. A baby gone, a family in custody, and a sense that systems meant to protect children may have failed. For investigators and prosecutors, the immediate priorities are clear. Continue the search to recover remains if possible, secure and analyze forensic evidence, build a prosecutable case that ties alleged abuse to death, and ensure the safety of any other children connected to the family. For the public, the urgent request is to support verified investigative leads. If you have relevant footage, seen unusual activity, or have direct knowledge of the child's movements or the family's interactions, contact the Homicide Detail. This case is still unfolding, and the path to truth will require patience, rigorous forensic work, and a steady stream of credible information. The charges filed are serious and reflect prosecutors' current assessment of the evidence, but they will be tested in court. The potential discovery of remains would be a devastating confirmation of the worst fears. If that happens, it will also mark another chapter in a local reckoning about how to better protect children and how to fix the gaps investigators and officials now say existed. If you have information about Emmanuel's disappearance, authorities ask you to call the Riverside County Sheriff's Homicide Detail at 909-890-4904. If you wish to remain anonymous, you may contact WeTip at 1-800-78 CRIME 1-800-782-7463 or submit a tip online through their site. This is a tragic and evolving story. A missing infant whose case has moved from hope to suspicion and now to criminal charges and a desperate search for answers. Keep pressing for facts. Keep sharing verified leads and hold systems accountable so the painful questions raised by Emmanuel's death lead to real changes that protect children in the future.